The church didn't just hide the Gospel of Thomas for 17 centuries. They declared it so dangerous that possessing it was punishable by death. And now we know why. It contains 114 sayings of Jesus that completely dismantle everything organized religion built to control you. This wasn't lost. It was buried deliberately in the Egyptian desert in 367 AD, when a bishop ordered all heretical texts destroyed. But the monks who treasured this gospel hid it in a sealed jar rather than burn the words that could set souls free. Unlike the four Gospels Rome approved, Thomas records Jesus' teaching that the kingdom of God isn't in heaven or a distant future. It's already inside you, accessible right now through direct knowing, and that you don't need priests, churches, or institutions between you and divine truth. The authorities have spent 2 millennia building elaborate systems of salvation, sacraments, and hierarchies. But Jesus told Thomas and the other disciples something fundamentally different. You already contain everything you need, and the path to awakening doesn't require their permission. If you've always felt that organized religion keeps you dependent rather than liberated, that it offers salvation tomorrow while keeping you powerless today, your soul recognizes what the church tried to erase. Drop a comment if you've sensed there's a version of Jesus' teachings that institutions don't want you to discover. In December 1945, an Egyptian farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Saman was digging for fertilizer near the town of Nag Hammadi when his shovel struck something hard, a sealed earthenware jar buried in the cliff face. He hesitated before breaking it open, fearing it might contain a jinn, but what he found instead would shake the foundations of Christianity. 13 leather-bound codices containing 52 ancient texts, including a complete copy of the Gospel of Thomas. These weren't just old manuscripts, they were writings that early church authorities had condemned, banned, and systematically destroyed, texts that survived only because 4th century monks chose to hide them rather than watch them burn. Among all the discoveries at Nag Hammadi, the Gospel of Thomas stands as perhaps the most controversial, because it presents a Jesus whose teachings directly contradict the controlled narrative that institutions spent centuries constructing. The Gospel of Thomas contains no birth narrative, no crucifixion story, no resurrection account. It's simply 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, recorded by Didymos Judas Thomas, Thomas the Twin. The opening line sets the tone for everything that follows. These are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke, and which Didymos Judas Thomas wrote down. Secret sayings. Not public sermons designed for mass consumption, but private teachings given to those ready to hear them. The text immediately positions itself as esoteric knowledge, gnosis reserved for those who seek it actively, rather than passively receive it from authorities. This distinction matters enormously, because it places spiritual power directly in the hands of the individual seeker, rather than the institutional gatekeeper. Consider saying number 3, where Jesus declares, "The kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you." When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that it is you who are the sons of the living Father. But if you will not know yourselves, you dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty. Read that again slowly. Jesus isn't promising heaven after death if you follow the right rules. He's stating that divine reality exists within you right now, accessible through self-knowledge. The path to the kingdom isn't through priests or sacraments, it's through knowing yourself deeply enough to recognize your own divine nature. You're already a child of the living Father. The poverty Jesus warns about isn't material. It's a spiritual poverty of living disconnected from your own divine essence, and that poverty is self-imposed through ignorance of who you truly are. This teaching obliterates the entire structure of salvation through institution. If the kingdom is already within you, what do you need the church for? If knowing yourself reveals your divine nature, why would you need someone else to mediate between you and God? The Gospel of Thomas presents a radically different path, one where spiritual authority resides in direct personal experience rather than institutional hierarchy. This is precisely why the text was banned, not because it was inaccurate or false, but because it was too empowering. It gave individuals the tools to access divine reality without requiring the very systems that claimed exclusive access to salvation. When church authorities met at councils in the 4th century to determine which texts would be considered canonical scripture and which would be condemned as heresy, they faced a critical decision. They could include texts like Thomas that emphasized individual gnosis and direct knowing, or they could canonize texts that supported institutional authority and the necessity of church mediation. The choice they made shaped Christianity for the next 1700 years. The Gospel of Thomas didn't make the cut, not because early Christians didn't value it, but because it threatened the power structure being built. By 367 AD, Bishop Athanasius of Alexandria issued his Easter letter commanding that all non-canonical texts be destroyed. The monks of the Pachomian monastery near Nag Hammadi received this order, but instead of burning these precious Gospels, they sealed them in a jar and buried them in the cliff, preserving them for a future generation ready to receive them. Saying number 70 presents another teaching that institutions couldn't tolerate. If you bring forth what is within you, what you have will save you. If you do not have that within you, what you do not have within you will kill you. Jesus is describing the critical importance of expressing your authentic divine nature. Salvation isn't something granted from outside. It's something you already possess that must be brought forth and lived. But notice the warning. If you suppress what is within you, if you deny your own divine essence and live according to external controls and authorities, that denial will destroy you. This isn't metaphorical death. It's the spiritual death of living disconnected from your true self, playing a role assigned by others rather than embodying the divine spark you carry. How many people have spent entire lifetimes following rules created by institutions, seeking approval from external authorities, hoping that correct belief and proper behavior would eventually earn them salvation, all while the kingdom existed within them the entire time? The tragedy isn't that they failed to reach God, it's that they never realized God was never distant. They were taught to seek outside themselves what they already possessed within. They were trained to distrust their own spiritual knowing and depend on others to interpret truth for them. The Gospel of Thomas offers a different path. Trust the divine wisdom within you, cultivate direct knowing, and recognize that you already are what you've been seeking. The text repeatedly emphasizes this theme of hidden wisdom becoming revealed, saying 5 states, recognize what is in your sight, and that which is hidden from you will become plain to you. For there is nothing hidden which will not become manifest. This isn't about searching for secret knowledge in external sources. It's about learning to truly see what's already present. Most people look at reality through layers of conditioning, belief systems imposed by culture and religion, fears and desires that distort perception. When you learn to see clearly, without these distortions, the hidden becomes obvious. Truth isn't concealed because it's far away. It's concealed because you haven't developed the clarity to recognize it right in front of you. Compare this to how institutional Christianity has functioned for most of its history. Mystery was externalized and professionalized. Priests performed sacred rites in Latin that common people couldn't understand. Sacraments were controlled and dispensed by authorized officials. Interpretation of Scripture was reserved for trained theologians and church authorities. Spiritual knowledge was systematically removed from individual access and concentrated in institutional hands. The Gospel of Thomas represents the complete opposite approach. The mysteries are within you, accessible through your own direct knowing, requiring no intermediary. This democratization of spiritual authority threatened the entire edifice of ecclesiastical power. If this knowledge is resonating with something deep inside you, hit that like button. It tells me you're ready for more truth. And subscribe, because those who are meant to find this channel will find it. The algorithm works mysteriously for the chosen ones. Saying number 2 provides what might be considered the core teaching of the entire gospel. Let him who seeks continue seeking until he finds. When he finds, he will become troubled. When he becomes troubled, he will be astonished, and he will rule over the all. Notice the progression Jesus describes. Seeking doesn't lead directly to peace and comfort. It leads first to finding, which causes trouble. Why? Because when you find truth that contradicts everything you've been taught, everything you've based your identity and worldview upon, it's profoundly disturbing. Your comfortable beliefs shatter. Your sense of how reality works gets overturned. This trouble is necessary. It's the dismantling of false certainty that makes space for genuine knowing. Beyond the trouble comes astonishment, that moment of recognition when you see reality as it actually is, rather than how you were told it should be. And then, having passed through seeking, finding, trouble, and astonishment, you rule over the all. You recognize your own divine nature and authority. This progression describes the actual path of awakening, and it's nothing like what institutions promise. They offer comfort, certainty, clear answers, and the security of belonging to something larger. The Gospel of Thomas offers something far more challenging and far more real: the unsettling journey of discovering who you actually are beneath all the conditioning. Are you willing to be troubled? Are you willing to have your comfortable beliefs dismantled? Most people aren't. They prefer the certainty of institutional answers over the discomfort of genuine seeking. But for those who are willing to walk this path, something extraordinary waits on the other side. Consider saying number 13, where Jesus asks his disciples who they think he is. Simon Peter answers that he's like a righteous angel. Matthew says he's like a wise philosopher, but Thomas responds, "Master, my mouth is wholly incapable of saying whom you are like." Jesus then takes Thomas aside and speaks 3 sayings to him privately, sayings so profound that Thomas can't repeat them to the other disciples. When they press him to share what Jesus said, Thomas replies, "If I tell you one of the things which he told me, you will pick up stones and throw them at me. A fire will come out of the stones and burn you up." The teachings were that dangerous, that contrary to accepted belief. What could Jesus have said that would provoke such violent rejection? We don't know the specific content of those 3 sayings, but we know their nature. They revealed truth so contrary to religious orthodoxy that speaking it would be considered blasphemy, punishable by stoning. Perhaps Jesus told Thomas directly about the divine nature within him. Perhaps he revealed the illusory nature of the authorities and powers that claim dominion over souls. Perhaps he explained that the kingdom isn't coming in some distant future. It's here now, invisible to those who seek it externally. Whatever those 3 sayings contained, they represent knowledge that challenges power structures, and power structures have always responded to such challenges with violence. The Gospel of Thomas repeatedly emphasizes becoming like children to enter the kingdom. But this isn't about innocence or simplicity. Saying number 4 states, "The man old in days will not hesitate to ask a small child 7 days old about the place of life, and he will live. For many who are first will become last, and they will become one and the same." A newborn child hasn't yet been conditioned by society, religion, culture, and authority. A newborn hasn't learned what it's supposed to believe, how it's supposed to think, what it's supposed to value. Becoming like a child means unlearning all that conditioning and recovering the direct perception and natural knowing that institutions trained you to abandon. The old man asking the newborn about the place of life represents wisdom, recognizing that truth exists before conditioning, before all the layers of belief systems that obscure it. Throughout the text, Jesus criticizes those who place authority in external rules and rituals rather than internal knowing. Saying 24 records the disciples asking Jesus to show them the place where he is. Jesus responds, "There is light within a man of light, and he lights up the whole world. If he does not shine, he is darkness." The place where Jesus exists isn't a physical location or a distant heaven. It's the state of inner illumination, the awakened consciousness that recognizes its own divine nature. You don't find Jesus by looking outside yourself. You find him by discovering the light within your own being. And if that light doesn't shine, if you remain identified with the conditioned self, following external authorities rather than internal knowing, you dwell in darkness regardless of how many religious practices you perform or how perfectly you follow institutional rules. This teaching directly contradicts the model of salvation promoted by ecclesiastical Christianity. The Church has historically taught that salvation comes through specific mechanisms it controls: baptism, communion, confession, following church doctrine, accepting approved beliefs. The Gospel of Thomas teaches that salvation comes through awakening to what you already are. The Church says you're born in sin and need redemption through Christ's sacrifice. Thomas's Jesus says you're born carrying the divine spark and need only to recognize and express it. The Church says, "Follow us in our sacraments." Thomas's Jesus says, "Know yourself." These aren't compatible models. They're fundamentally opposed approaches to spiritual life. Are you starting to see why this text was buried for 17 centuries? Why possessing it during the Middle Ages could get you burned at the stake? Why the institutional church worked so hard to eliminate it? The Gospel of Thomas gives people direct access to spiritual truth without requiring the mediation, authority, or control of religious institutions. It tells people they already possess what the church claims only it can provide. It empowers individual spiritual knowing over institutional authority. From the perspective of those building and maintaining religious power structures, this is the most dangerous teaching possible. Saying number 77 contains one of the most radical declarations in the entire text. It is I who am the light which is above them all. It is I who am the all. From me did the all come forth, and unto me did the all extend. Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. Jesus isn't claiming to be a unique divine being separate from creation. He's declaring that the divine consciousness he embodies is present in all things, pervading all reality. You can find this same consciousness in a piece of wood, under a stone, everywhere you look, because divine reality isn't localized in one person or one place. It's the fundamental nature of existence itself. If this is true, if the divine pervades all things, then you carry it within you as well. You aren't seeking something distant and separate. You're awakening to what you already are. This teaching of divine immanence, of God present in all things and all beings, couldn't be more different from the model of divine transcendence that institutions prefer. A transcendent God, distant and separate, requires mediators, priests, churches, rituals to bridge the gap. An immanent God, present in all things including yourself, requires no intermediary. You can access divine reality directly because you're already participating in it. The institutional model needs the gap between humanity and divinity to justify its existence. The Gospel of Thomas eliminates the gap entirely. If you've made it this far, you're not here by accident. Like this video to affirm your awakening. Subscribe to continue receiving these transmissions. And comment below with "I remember" if your soul recognized these truths. Let's build a community of the awakened. Near the end of the text, saying number 113 records the disciples asking Jesus when the kingdom will come. Jesus responds, "It will not come by waiting for it. It will not be a matter of saying, 'Here it is,' or 'There it is.' Rather, the kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth, and men do not see it. The kingdom isn't coming in some future apocalypse. It isn't located in a distant heaven you reach after death. It's already here, spread across the earth, present in this moment, but invisible to those who haven't developed the perception to recognize it. You don't need to wait for the kingdom. You need to wake up to the fact that you're already in it. You've always been in it. You just haven't been able to see it because you're looking for something else, somewhere else, in some other time. This is the final dismantling of institutional control. You don't need to wait for salvation, earn it through proper behavior, receive it as a reward after death, or obtain it through church sacraments. Salvation isn't a future state. It's a present recognition. The kingdom is here now. The divine is within you now. Everything you've been seeking exists in this moment, accessible through direct knowing. All that's required is the willingness to see clearly, to know yourself deeply, to bring forth what is within you rather than living according to external controls and authorities. The church spent 17 centuries hiding this text because it represents everything they built their power to oppose. They created systems of salvation by institution. Thomas presents salvation by knowing. They established hierarchies of spiritual authority. Thomas teaches direct access. They promise the kingdom as a future reward for obedience. Thomas declares it already present for those with eyes to see. They made people dependent on external mediation. Thomas empowers people to access truth directly within themselves. These competing models cannot coexist. One must dominate or both must be available, and people must choose. For 1700 years, the choice was made for you. The Gospel of Thomas was eliminated, banned, destroyed, hidden away. Only the institutional model was permitted. But now, the text has returned. Now you have access to these secret sayings. Now you can read Jesus teaching that the kingdom is within you, that knowing yourself reveals your divine nature, that salvation isn't something granted by authorities, but something you already possess that must be brought forth and lived. The question isn't whether these teachings are true. Your soul already knows the answer to that. The question is whether you're willing to act on what you know, to trust your own direct spiritual knowing over the centuries of institutional conditioning that taught you to distrust yourself. You've spent your whole life being told you need someone else to interpret truth for you, someone else to mediate between you and the divine, someone else's approval and validation to confirm your spiritual worth. The Gospel of Thomas tells you something entirely different. You already contain everything you need. The kingdom is already within you. Salvation is already yours through recognition of your own divine nature. Which voice will you listen to? The institutions that demand your dependence, or the ancient teaching that offers your liberation? Your soul already knows the answer. The only question is whether you'll have the courage to live accordingly.